Claire found the second phone by accident. Not looking for it, not suspicious of anything, just reaching for a charger in a drawer that was never locked, because there had never been a reason to lock it. 3 years of messages, not with a stranger, not with a coworker or someone from an app or anyone she could have braced herself for. With her sister. She didn't scream. She didn't confront anyone that night. She sat at the kitchen table until the sun came up, reading a version of her own life that had been happening in a room she was never invited into. And by the time morning came, she had already decided something. Not what she was going to say, what she was going to do. There's a particular kind of silence that settles over a house once you know something you're not ready to say out loud yet. It's not calm. It's not peace. It's the sound of someone rearranging their entire understanding of their own life, one piece at a time, while everyone around them keeps sleeping like nothing has changed. 6 years earlier, Claire had built her life the slow way. She and Daniel married young without much money, and she was the one who kept the household running while he finished his degree, then his first job, then the promotion that finally let them breathe. She never resented any of it. That's what partnership looked like, she told herself. You carry each other in turns. Mia, her younger sister, had always been close. Closer than most sisters, really. She was at every holiday, every birthday, every Sunday dinner. The kind of built-in family member nobody questions because she'd simply always been there. When Claire and Daniel bought their first house, Mia helped them move boxes for 2 straight days. When their daughter was born, Mia was in the waiting room before Daniel's own parents arrived. Nobody warns you about the danger of the people who are always there. You stop watching them, not because you don't love them, but because trust, real trust, eventually stops looking like vigilance and starts looking like comfort. Claire had spent a decade being comfortable. If you've ever trusted someone completely, the kind of trust you don't even think to name because it's just the water you swim in, you already know how this story is going to hurt. Stick around, because where this goes next is not where you think. This channel tells stories about betrayal that comes from the last place you'd expect, and the quiet, patient justice that eventually catches up to it. If that's the kind of story you're here for, subscribe now, because there's a new one every week. Claire wasn't a naive person. She managed a household budget down to the dollar, negotiated her own salary twice without help, and was the one everyone in the family called when something needed to be handled calmly and correctly. That's precisely what made this so hard to see coming. The people closest to her weren't strangers who could slip past her guard. They were the guard. She used to joke back then that Daniel and Mia got along almost too well, the kind of easy comment people make about family members who simply share a sense of humor. She had said that joke out loud, more than once, at dinner parties, never once imagining what it actually meant. Looking back, Claire could find at least a dozen small moments she'd waved away without a second thought. Daniel suddenly taking calls in the garage. Mia canceling plans with an explanation that was just slightly too detailed to be casual. The two of them going quiet, just for a second, whenever Claire walked into a room mid-conversation. None of it, on its own, meant anything. That was the trap. Each individual moment had a perfectly reasonable explanation, and Claire, like most people, chose the explanation that let her keep living the life she already had. It's not naivety. It's the same instinct that lets anyone function without treating every relationship like a crime scene. There was one night, about 8 months before she found the phone, when she almost asked. Daniel came home late from what he said was a work dinner, and something about the way he avoided her eyes while hanging up his coat made her stomach tighten for exactly 1 second. She almost said something. Instead, she asked if he'd eaten, and he said yes, and the moment passed, the way moments like that always do, right up until they don't. Even Mia's behavior, in hindsight, had a pattern Claire simply hadn't been looking for. The extra effort on birthdays. The way she always offered to babysit on the exact nights Daniel claimed to have late meetings. At the time, it read as generosity. Later, it would read as something closer to a schedule. The messages didn't start the way Claire expected. She'd braced herself without realizing it for something sudden, a single moment of weakness caught in the act. What she found instead was worse. It was patient, deliberate. Built slowly over years, in small, careful pieces, disguised inside a relationship that had every reason to look completely innocent from the outside. The first messages, more than 3 years old, were almost nothing. A joke, a comment about a movie. But somewhere around month 4, the tone shifted just slightly in a way that would have meant nothing to a stranger reading them cold, but meant everything to Claire, who knew exactly how her husband talked when he wanted something to stay quiet. By the end of the first year, they weren't hiding much anymore, not from each other. They were hiding from her. Weekend trips Daniel claimed were work conferences. A hotel receipt Mia had once explained away as a girls' trip that never happened. An entire second relationship, built inside the architecture of Claire's own family, using the trust she'd given both of them as the very thing that kept her from looking too closely. The hardest part wasn't the romance. Claire could have understood, eventually, if this had simply been two people who fell into something they shouldn't have and had the decency to end it, or the courage to tell her. What she couldn't get past was the years of small, specific lies required to keep it running. Every dinner where Mia sat across from her, asking about her day. Every night Daniel came home and asked what was for dinner, like nothing in the world was wrong. She read for 4 hours straight. When she finally closed the phone, the sun was already coming up through the kitchen window, and something in her chest had gone very quiet. Not numb. Quiet, the way a house goes quiet right before a storm actually arrives. Somewhere around the 3rd hour, she stopped reading for facts and started reading for a different kind of pattern. The small, specific lies each of them had told independently, and how well those lies had lined up with each other over the years. That was the detail that unsettled her most. This hadn't been two people stumbling into something reckless. It had been coordinated, protected, maintained, with the same care most people reserve for something they actually value. At one point, near the middle of the messages, she found an exchange from the week of her own daughter's 2nd birthday. While Claire had spent that entire day arranging balloons and calling relatives, Mia and Daniel had spent part of it planning when they could next see each other. That single detail, more than any other, was the one Claire couldn't stop thinking about for weeks afterward. There's a specific kind of grief that comes from being betrayed by two people at once, and it doesn't behave like ordinary heartbreak. Claire didn't just lose a marriage that morning. She lost the version of her own family she thought she understood, the one where her sister was safe, where her home was safe, where the people closest to her were exactly who they appeared to be. She thought about every year of Sunday dinners differently now. Every hug from her sister replayed itself with a question mark attached. She thought about her daughter, 5 years old, asleep down the hall, and the life that little girl thought was normal, stable, safe, built on a foundation that had been quietly rotting for years without anyone telling her. For 2 days, Claire didn't say a word to either of them. She went to work. She made breakfast. She kissed her daughter goodnight. She became, without planning to, an extraordinarily good actress, because some part of her, the part that was still thinking clearly under all the pain, understood something important. The moment she said anything, she would lose the only advantage she had left. The advantage of being the only one who knew what she knew. That first night, lying awake next to a man she no longer recognized, she found herself grieving something strange, not just the marriage, but the version of the last 6 years she'd been carrying around in her memory. Every anniversary, every ordinary Tuesday. She would have to look back at all of it now and wonder which parts had been real. Claire made a decision that surprised even her. She wasn't going to confront them, not yet. Not until she understood exactly what she was dealing with, and exactly what she wanted the outcome to look like. This wasn't about revenge, not the loud, immediate kind that feels satisfying for exactly one moment and costs you everything afterward. Claire had watched enough of her friends go through divorces built on anger to know how that story usually ends. Months of legal battles fueled by fury, both sides bleeding money and energy, and in the end, nobody actually getting what they wanted, just what was left over after the fight. She wanted something more specific. She wanted the truth to come out on her terms, at a moment she chose, with every piece of leverage already in her hands before either of them knew she was holding any of it. That meant time. It meant patience she didn't know she had. And it meant becoming, for a few weeks, someone who could sit across the dinner table from the two people who had betrayed her most and give away absolutely nothing. It also meant grieving quietly, alone, without the comfort most people get from telling a friend or a parent right away. Claire chose not to tell anyone yet, not because she didn't trust them, but because every person she told would be one more person who might, even accidentally, tip Daniel or Mia off before she was ready. She thought, more than once during those first few days, about a piece of advice her grandmother used to repeat. The person who reacts first usually loses the most. At the time, as a teenager, Claire had rolled her eyes at it. Now, sitting at her own kitchen table with a secret too heavy to carry alone, she understood exactly what her grandmother had meant. Over the next 6 weeks, Claire did 3 things quietly, methodically, without either Daniel or Mia noticing anything had changed. First, she talked to a lawyer. Not to file anything yet, just to understand, in cold, practical terms, exactly what she was entitled to, what evidence actually mattered in her state, and what mistakes people commonly made when they let emotion drive decisions that should have been strategic. Second, she quietly moved her own finances. Not dramatically, nothing that would raise a flag. She opened an account Daniel didn't know about, redirected a portion of her paycheck into it, and began building something that was entirely, unmistakably hers for the first time in years. Third, and this took the most discipline, she kept documenting. Every strange late night, every canceled plan, every small inconsistency in a story, the kind of details that meant nothing on their own but, laid side by side over weeks, formed a pattern too complete to argue with. What Claire didn't do was just as important. She didn't drink more than usual. She didn't lash out over small things. She didn't give either of them a single reason to suspect that the woman quietly making dinner every night was 3 steps ahead of both of them. If anything, she got better at pretending, because she now had a reason worth pretending for. She also started, quietly, rebuilding a support system outside the family that had betrayed her. A single close friend from work, someone with no connection to Mia or Daniel, became the one person she finally told, and having even one ally who knew the truth made the weeks of silence around everyone else easier to carry. There was one night that almost ended the whole plan early. Claire was reviewing a folder of screenshots on her laptop at the kitchen counter when she heard Daniel's car pull into the driveway, 10 minutes earlier than his usual schedule. She had maybe 40 seconds. She closed the laptop, but not before he was already through the door, close enough to have seen the screen if he'd glanced over even a second sooner. He didn't. He asked what she was working on, and she said a budget spreadsheet for their daughter's school fund, which was, technically, also open in another tab, ready exactly for a moment like this one. Her hands didn't shake until he left the room. That night taught her something she carried through the rest of the process. The people you're planning around are not paying nearly as much attention to you as you are to them. Daniel and Mia were so confident in how well they'd hidden everything for 3 years that it never occurred to either of them Claire might be doing some quiet work of her own. Their confidence, in the end, became the exact blind spot she needed. After that close call, Claire changed one habit. She stopped keeping anything sensitive on a device that lived in the house overnight. Everything moved to a cloud folder only she could access, checked only from her phone, only when she was certain she was alone. It cost her a little convenience. It cost her nothing in exposure. By the 7th week, Claire had everything she needed. Financial independence quietly established. A lawyer briefed and ready. A complete, dated timeline of the affair, corroborated by messages neither Daniel nor Mia knew she had access to. And something else, something she hadn't originally planned for, but that changed the shape of everything once she found it. Daniel and Mia hadn't just been having an affair. They had also, 6 months earlier, opened a joint account together, quietly moving money out of what Claire had believed was their shared family savings. This wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was theft, dressed up as romance. Claire scheduled a single family dinner. Nothing unusual on the surface, just a Sunday like any other. She invited her parents, which she hadn't done in months, and made sure Mia knew they'd be there too. She wanted witnesses, not for drama, for truth, delivered once clearly in front of the people who deserved to hear it directly from her instead of through whispers later. She wasn't planning to yell. She wasn't planning to cry. She had spent 7 weeks making sure that when this moment finally came, she would be the calmest person in the room. She chose a Sunday specifically because it was the one day of the week that had always felt safest, the day reserved, in her family, for the people who mattered most. There was something she wanted, quietly, to reclaim about that fact, even if no one else in the room would understand the significance of it until much later. She spent the morning of that Sunday doing something almost ordinary. She baked bread, the same recipe her mother had taught her years earlier, filling the house with a smell that had nothing to do with what was coming. It wasn't performance. It was, in its own strange way, the last quiet moment she wanted to give herself before everything in the room changed. Dinner went normally for the first 20 minutes. Claire made small talk. She passed the potatoes. She let her daughter show everyone a drawing from school. Then, once dessert was on the table, she set down a folder in the middle of it, closed, and said simply that there was something everyone needed to see before the night ended. She didn't raise her voice once. She laid out the timeline, the messages, dates matched against trips Daniel had claimed were work travel. The joint account opened without her knowledge. She let the documents speak, because after 7 weeks of preparation, they said everything more clearly than her own anger ever could. Mia turned white. Daniel tried for about 30 seconds to explain it away as something it clearly wasn't, until Claire calmly placed one more piece of paper on the table. A printed message, dated 4 months earlier, in which Daniel had written to Mia that Claire would never find out, because she trusted them both too much to ever check. Her mother started crying. Her father didn't say a word, just stared at Daniel with an expression Claire had never seen on his face before. And in that silence, the one that follows the exact moment someone's carefully built life finally collapses under its own weight, Claire finally understood what she'd been building toward for 7 weeks. Not revenge, just the truth, arriving exactly when she was ready for it to. Mia tried once to reach for Claire's hand across the table. Claire didn't pull away violently. She simply moved it calmly, back into her own lap, and continued speaking to her parents as though the gesture had never happened. That single, quiet refusal said more than any accusation could have. Daniel, for his part, tried a different approach once denial stopped working. He reached for anger, accusing Claire of invading his privacy, of turning a family dinner into an ambush. Nobody at that table, not even Mia, backed him up. Some silences are their own kind of verdict. The following months weren't dramatic in the way movies make betrayal look. There was no screaming match caught on camera, no public scene. Just a quiet, methodical unwinding of a marriage, made considerably easier by 7 weeks of preparation most people never think to do until it's too late. The divorce settlement reflected everything Claire had documented. The joint account Daniel and Mia had quietly built was recovered in full. Daniel moved out within a month, into an apartment considerably smaller than the life he'd been secretly funding on the side. Mia, for her part, lost more than a relationship. She lost a sister who had once been her closest friend, and a family that no longer looked at her the same way, not out of cruelty, but because trust, once broken this completely, doesn't rebuild on its own timeline. Claire kept the house. She kept her daughter in the same school, the same bedroom, the same sense of stability that mattered more to her than anything else in this entire process. And she kept something else, something she hadn't expected to gain from any of this. A version of herself who no longer confused comfort with safety, who understood now that trust has to be paired with attention, not replaced by it. A year later, her daughter barely remembers a time when it was any different. Claire still sees her parents every Sunday. Mia is not invited, not out of cruelty, but because some things, once broken this completely, simply don't get rebuilt on anyone else's timeline but the person who was hurt. People sometimes ask her, the few who know the full story, whether she regrets waiting those 7 weeks instead of confronting them the moment she found the phone. She always says the same thing. The version of her that found that phone at 2 in the morning wanted to burn everything down immediately. The version of her that waited got everything she actually needed, and burned nothing down that she didn't mean to. If this story hit close to home, or reminded you why patience beats panic every time, subscribe. Because next week we're telling another story about the betrayal nobody sees coming, and the justice that quietly finds its way there anyway. What would you have done in Claire's position? Confront immediately or build the case first? Let us know in the comments.